Hey guys, it's Kay Journey, and I am back today to actually share with you guys how I edit, like my step-by-step process. Once I finish with a first draft, I usually I'll have started with a list of scenes. And by the time I'm finished with my first draft, that list of scenes will look wildly different than it did in the beginning. Excuse me. So the first thing that I will do is I will take all of the original list of scenes, and I will move it into a spreadsheet, and I'll create the changes that are in it. So like if I've added 2 scenes between these 2 scenes, I'll throw those into, I'll create new cells and I'll throw them into the list. It's actually kind of hard to talk about this without showing you that. Hang on a second. Okay, so I just went and printed out some of the first parts of my plot for the book club book. I'm not really giving too much away here, which is nice, because I really don't want to. But so I have, my first couple scenes where they're introductory scenes. This is introducing kind of the mystery that's already going on. And then this is the scene that drags them into the mystery. Excuse me. So if I wanted to add a scene here, what I would do is I would add a cell wherever the scene needed to go. And so it would drop it down a line, right? It would create one of these lines, and then I would add the number. And then in here is a date, but you don't really see it in this one because, whatever. And then I do the character, so Vlada. And then, whatever's happening with the scene, right? And it'll jump up in there. And then I move this I basically take all of this information and I put it into another spreadsheet, and I turn it into something that could print on here. So what I'll do is I'll actually, I set it up sideways. And so I'll have each line be, the point of view, or the number, the point of view, the date of that point of view, and then what it is, and it'll print out on these. It'll just basically takes each of these bodies of information and puts it on a card, and then I'll print it out. It's a lot easier to do this in Google Sheets than it is to do it in any sort of document, because documents print out like this, and if you hit an enter one too many times, whatever, it turns into a big old mess. But doing it in Google Sheets and printing it out specifically this way, you can just create your cells and then put the information in as needed. And if it's too much information for the cell, you can actually shrink the text to fit into the cell. So that works a bazillion times better than trying to do it in Google Docs or trying to do these by hand. I have a history of trying to do these by hand. I actually recently, you probably saw, if you've been following me for a while, you saw a video where I did some color-coded one of these by hand. And I actually stopped doing that about, I want to say like a fifth of the way through, and realized I was just wasting time. So what I did is I actually printed them out on note cards. So those are now, those are now these plain white note cards. In fact, I've got 3 piles of these right now. I've got the book club book, I've got book number 3 and book number 4, and they're everywhere. So anyway, the first step after finishing it, after going through and figuring out what scenes I've added and where they need to go and how the numbers need to change, I'll create a spreadsheet. Then I'll print these out with the new numbers on them. And then I'll go into the document and I'll say, okay, this is no longer scene 1 or scene, whatever. It's now scene 10, right? And so I'll change the number in the document so that when I go to add in the details that I'm adding to these cards, I can just, look for the number, find it, and add the details. So what goes on the cards? Well, first thing that goes on the cards are any major changes or plot things that I know needs to be added. So like right here, I changed the date that the book starts because I didn't want Halloween to fall in the middle of my paranormal romantic murder mystery series. I didn't want it complicating things. So I figured if I started it on Halloween, I could still get the fall vibes. I could still have that kind of cozy feeling that I was going for. And I could also get the drama of it's a ghost story around Halloween out of the way at the very beginning, because it's not about Halloween. Like, and I don't want that kind of, that energy. I want it to just show up here as a blip in the beginning of, oh, okay, this is what happened this night. But I do want to make sure that I add in elements of Halloween to these scenes because it wasn't in there in the beginning. So like, how do these characters feel about it being Halloween night and they're having this book club meeting? Like, that's kind of the energy that I want to go into it. So the next thing that I do, and I don't add all of it all at once, and I will be adding more to these as I go. But the next thing that I do is I fill out character sheets. So I have these labeled as non-point of view character sheets and point of view character sheets. And that's because in my other books, that my main series, my point of view characters are my main characters. And all of my main characters have, you know, moments where it's from their point of view. In the book club book, it's only two characters have point of views, but there are other main characters. So I'm just leaving the labels as is, but this is for not main characters. So I'll have like the information of what they need. What are they? Because I tend to write about creatures, not just humans. Their gender, are they an antagonist or protagonist? General temperament, I kind of I forgot to delete that. Age, hair, eyes, skin, height, and body type and distinguishing characteristics. And this is a big gap for a reason. Sometimes you have characters with horns and wings and all sorts of stuff. So then, general temperament. So for non-point of view characters, I don't generally tend to explain why they are the way they are. Sometimes I do, like I'll give them a little bit of a rough, you know, background. But for the most part, if I don't want you to care about them, I'm not going to give them too much background just because it's not necessary and it takes up space and time in a book that could be otherwise used for pushing the plot forward. So I don't do that. So just general temperament. Are they nice? Are they mean? Are they rude? Are they controlling? Are they, you know, what have you? Then their social standing. It's kind of important to know, like, hey, is this person a bum or is this person, you know, like the mayor of the town, like that kind of thing. Their moral compass. So again, are they an asshole? Why are they an asshole? What pisses them off? You know, are they an asshole because they hate injustice, or are they an asshole because they are an abuser and they perpetuate injustice? That kind of thing. What are they scared of? You know, basic, like, what motivates them a little bit to behave the way they behave. And then any magical powers or skills. This works for any, like, fantasy or sci-fi, or actually even really any, frankly, because if I was doing, like, a very normal speculative fiction that doesn't have all of the fantasy elements or the sci-fi elements, it would just be special skills. So, like, maybe, you know, you have a tech guy. So what's his special skill? He's really good at, you know, dealing with computers, things like that. How do they use their powers and skills? What does it cost them to use their powers and skills? Because sometimes you have characters and creatures and things that, like, they can do this really big, you know, pop of magic, but then, you know, it knocks them on their butt for a while. Or maybe it doesn't cost them anything, and that's when you should be really scared of them. I usually fill out one of these for, just for any side character that's important to the story. And sometimes I'll only fill out just this part because I don't need the rest of this. I only get as in-depth on each character as I need for the story. So if this character pops in for, you know, a couple of scenes as for, you know, filler or whatever, or as a bystander, I'm not going to fill out all of it. I'm going to fill out just what I need. And sometimes I don't need to fill out all of it because all of these other questions are already answered in the story and in my head, and I don't need to fill it out. So then we get on to, you know, our main characters. And so this is, again, you know, what are they? Gender, you know, antagonist or protagonist, all these important things that need to be consistent throughout. My first book, I kept changing the color of my main character's eyes throughout it, and I didn't catch it until like the third draft because I hadn't developed this skill yet. And then what do they want? What do they need? What are they scared of? So if you read any like plotting books, you know, and when they talk about character development, these are kind of some of the basic things that they talk about. James Scott Bell's Right from the Middle kind of goes over some of this stuff. Like I have here The Mirror Moment. That's in his book. I'll link that book down below. I think it's called Right from the Middle, but if it's not, I'll go find it and figure it out. But I love his concept of the mirror moment, like this area in the middle of the book where the character has this moment where they realize they either need to change, or they're going to fail, or they're going to die, or something. So they kind of realize, I can't be this person I was at the beginning. I have to become the person that's leading towards the end, right? And so that's when they take charge of the story. When the main character goes, I'm no longer going to be somebody who's at the whims of this story. I am taking charge. I'm taking my power back. This is my story. And that's that moment. But in order to understand what that moment is, you need to know what they want and what they need. And then how do they react to fear? So, like, I've got some characters who run from fear. I've got some characters who move forward in fear. Some characters who get aggressive with fear. And you need to kind of know how your characters react. And I'm not just talking about fight, flight, or freeze. I'm talking about the subtle variations of them. Do you have somebody who fights by saying, I know how to solve this problem, or who fights by punching people in the face? How do they react to it? And then I kind of, in here, as much as I write moral compass, it's more like, what would they fight and die for? Who are they fighting for? Why are they continuing to be involved in the story? This could be a lot of other things. I've added a lot of other notes in here, but this was also much, much bigger years ago. And I pared it down because I just found that I was answering the same questions over and over again with different wording. And I just got really tired of it, so I edited those out. Again, social standing and resources. Again, we need to know if our character is, very poor, or if they grew up wealthy and they're suddenly experiencing hardship for the first time. Like, these things are important, just based on how they will behave. Okay, so mental illness and neurodivergence. A lot of my characters, most of my main characters, have some form of mental illness and or neurodivergence, mostly because that is my life experience. So it's something that I can understand and work with and portray in a way that feels authentic to me as the author. Because I don't think I know of any person who does not have some sort of mental or emotional struggle. So, yeah, anyway, that's always important for my main characters. Symptoms, if any, and solutions. Sometimes you have a main character who has, like, let's say, for example, PTSD, but they don't usually have any symptoms. So I'd be able to say, okay, at the moment, nothing is triggering this PTSD. We'll find out later if something does trigger it and what, how that happens. Because a lot of these characters tend to accidentally write themselves. A lot of authors talk about this. It happens to me. Most of the time when I plot events and how I think the characters will react to it. And then my plot kind of changes as my characters react to it in different ways, because they are kind of their own people. Again, magical powers and special skills. This is usually bigger for these characters. There's usually more to it. It's more nuanced. It's usually more involved. And then what does how do they use their powers and skills? What does it cost them to use their powers and skills? How much control do they have over their powers and skills? This is another one. When you're talking about main characters, they usually have varying levels of control. Some characters have full control over limited amount of powers. Some people have limited control over large amounts of power. Sometimes it's more balanced. It's a play in the subtleties of who these characters are. Especially someone who's got, like, again, let's say PTSD, and they've done the work and they've moved forward. They're going to have a very different level of control over themselves and their powers and their skills than, say, somebody who was traumatized last week and who's still having daily panic attacks and who's struggling. They're not going to have any control over these powers and skills because they're not going to have any control over themselves. And then what does their inner voice sound like? So this is where the point of view character comes from. I have characters who are, teenagers who cuss, and I have characters who are, 300 years old who are just like, why are you behaving that way? And, and anything in between. So I need to make sure that I have, do they cuss? Do they not cuss? What's their main language? How do they like to speak to each other? What's their love language? How do they show their love and appreciation? And also their disgust or their hatred. Like, if somebody's got physical touch as a love language, they don't want to be touched by someone they don't love. So they will shy away from it. I know that's my personal experience. I don't like being touched by people I don't love. But the people that I love, I'm obnoxious, and I touch them entirely too much. Ask my 4-year-old. She gets too much hugs and snuggles. So that kind of, and it all plays out in, like, this inner voice area, because it shows how they view the people around them. So, for instance, like, my angry teenager, he was viewing the people around them as how would they hurt him. He was always looking for weaknesses and strengths in people from a perspective of, how are you going to use that to hurt me? And should I be afraid of you or not? Whereas if you jump to another character, they're assessing people from a, like, why, I'm so confused as to why you're behaving like that. Or from another perspective of, I don't care why you're behaving like that, just don't hurt me. Or don't hurt the people I love, or don't get in my way, or whatever. Like, there's an array of how these different characters react to different things because they're different people. And then, of course, there's this, and I like to have kind of, especially this, I don't do this before the first draft. This is editing. So this is after I've done the first draft. If I overplot this before I write the first draft, this will inevitably change completely. So I usually wait until after the book's written, and then I fill in a lot of these things. As I'm writing, I'll fill out these things and like occasionally one of these, but for the most part, I fill these out after the first draft. And then I can kind of go in and hone in on, okay, so who do I think they were at the beginning? Who are they at the end? Who are they in the middle? And what's their mirror moment? And then I can kind of really fine tune it in the editing. And I'll go through and I'll be like, okay, I want their mirror moment to be in, scene 63 or scene 24 or what have you. And have it be kind of, okay, as much as they're already leaning into this change that I'm seeing happen, I want to make sure that they have this moment where it really clicks in their brain and it really becomes a thing, so that the readers feel like they're having this emotional experience with the character, and kind of really pushing it and pushing the change and the realizations that this character's having. And sometimes this can be over several scenes, but usually I try to make it in one scene where like I'll have a build up towards this, and then there's that crux of a moment, and then I'll have the fallout of it and who they become. And sometimes who they become is not a great person. Sometimes who they become is somebody that falls apart, and sometimes who they become is just empty. And sometimes who they become is an incredible human being who, takes responsibility for people more than themselves, and, all sorts of things. This kind of, it can be an positive arc or a negative arc, but there has to be an arc, otherwise what's the point of the story? And then on the back, and sometimes I do this and sometimes I don't. So if I have characters who have really complex relationships with each other, I'll actually map it out. Like in my first book, my main character, Aina, she has a very complex relationship with the people around her. And so I filled this out quite a lot in that book. Same thing for in the second book. One of my main characters is Sorsha. She's the queen of the Tuatha De Danann, and she has incredibly complex relationships with the people around her. So I had to make sure that I got those relationships nailed down and how they affect how she behaves. Because if she sees somebody as a servant, she doesn't see them as a person. And that's part of her problem. And that's part of her healing process, is realizing, just because I've known you for years and I'm the queen does not mean that I get to own your soul. And she kind of takes it for granted in the beginning that she has full control, and she has to realize throughout it that she actually doesn't, and that she needs to let go of control in order to maintain the loving part of how she feels about these people. It's a very fun dynamic, but I'm giving away some spoilers there. So if you read my second book, forget everything I just said. Anyway, so I do these. And then what I'll do is I will actually, especially when I was doing my other books, I will go through and I will take fine liners in the point of view color that I'm working with, and I'll have like some sort of a dot of the color on the characters. And then every scene that character shows up in, I'm going to take this back part, and in their color, I'm going to write how they're feeling, what's going on with them in each scene. Just kind of a brief overview of, oh, they're angry that this is happening, or, oh, they're having this. Just so that when I get to that scene and I get to editing that scene, I know exactly what I want to push for each character, what kind of dialogue I want them to be creating, what kind of physical reactions, emotional reactions, like the unspoken things. So when you're talking about someone's emotions, instead of saying, oh, they felt angry, you show it by saying, he balled his fists, or he scrunched his face, or he turned away, or, her breath got stronger and she scowled, and her, she bared her teeth. Like, there's a lot of different reactions that people have to anger, and there's a lot of different ways to show it. So I want to be able to make sure that I'm leaning into showing the emotions rather than telling them. And so that's something that this helps with, is like, how do people react this way? Instead of being like, well, that really pissed Devin off. I can say, this is how Devin reacted. Devin slammed the door, stomped away. Devin's one of my main characters in my first book, and he's the type to slam the door and stomp away. I love him very dearly. So anyway, I do that, and then what I'll do is I will actually read through. I'm going to bring this back again. So then what I will do is I will print it out. In fact, I'm doing this digitally now because one of the gifts I gave myself was signing up to GoodNotes. So I'm doing this now. I get a PDF of the book I'm working on, and I actually always print with a big margin on one side, and the PDF has that too, so I can write things over here. And what I will do is I will read through and I will highlight things that are not okay. And I got that advice from an editing book. I will link the editing book down below and show you guys a picture of it here. Okay, so in that book, the author talks about when you're first editing, you want to just take the book and read through it. And you don't want to try to fix anything while you're reading through it. And this was the best advice that I've ever gotten. Because I don't know, I think it's pretty universal that when people are writing big works of art, big books and things like that, you tend to get stuck editing the first few scenes over and over and over and over and over again because you want them to be perfect. And it's a trap. It is a total trap because it means that you are fixing these scenes and all of the rest of these scenes back here are no longer fixed. So the technique that author taught me was to highlight something that I know is not okay, or box around something that I know is not okay. Like, I want to fix that. Write a note about what's wrong with it, but don't try to fix it while I'm doing that because I need to be using the part of my brain that says, this is wrong. And don't worry about fixing it. Move on. And then what I do is I take all of the scratch notes that I've done in here. This is not okay. This is not okay. This is not okay. And then all of the information that's on these cards, from what I want to change in the plot, to the feel that I want to change, to the location details, to the character details that I will be adding to these cards. And I jump in and I fix scene by scene. And I desperately try not to go back and fix the beginning over and over and over again, unless as I'm editing, something changes that I really, really like. Then I'll go back and kind of tweak things farther up in the book in order to accommodate this new thing that I've edited in as I'm moving forward. But for the most part, I try not to change the plot too much at this point, unless it's something that's like really, really cool, or like I'll go into this and I'll know, okay, I have this big plot hole right here. And like, what's motivating this character and how do they do this thing that they do? And it'll be a big plot hole that I know that I'll need to fix while editing, that I just kind of swept over in the joy of writing the first draft. And so then that will change things. And usually I will figure those things out in this process before I even get to the point where I'm adding things in. I'll usually have an aha moment and, have a bazillion note cards next to me while I'm doing this part for, oh, I figured out what's wrong with that. And I'll keep the notes next to me for like these moments of brilliance, but I don't go in and try to fix where it would go in the text. I just have my moment of brilliance and move on and, let it go. And then I will just take each of these tools and I will use them to fix each scene individually. And sometimes I have to go through and do it twice, because I'll go through and I'll say, okay, I want to make sure that I'm focusing on each of these characters, especially when I'm doing the multi POV characters. I need to go through and really intensely make sure that every scene that's in this person's point of view is in this kind of voice. And so I will usually do that edit twice. For this book, because it is only 2 points of view and I know them so well and they are so wildly separated, I don't feel like I need to do it twice. But when I have 10 characters that are point of view characters, I do it at least twice, if not 3 or 4 times, because there's so many different voices that I need to make sure that I get correct. It's writing those other books is a lot more work, but they're also more emotionally intense, I think. Maybe I'm just adding too much work for myself. I don't know. But I like my multiple point of views and I'm not changing it because it's important to the story. One of the problems with like single point of view characters, or with only having 2 points of views, that I ran into with this is that the information that my story needs but my character doesn't yet it's really difficult to sift it in. And so you have to wait until it's important for the character to have this information to put it in the story. And that's really, really frustrating for me as an author. I would much rather have multiple point of views where this character over there discovers this thing, and the process of them coming and letting the main characters know what's happening and the journey that they went on. Like, it feels more liberating to me as an author to be able to write like that. This is much more limiting. It's less work, but it's also more limiting. And there's plus and minuses on both sides of the thing. But yeah. Anyway, I am rambling. I'm going to get off of here and go finish the vlog that I'm filming, and then get back to work on actually editing this. So thank you so much for watching. I will be back next week with another video. I think I'm doing, I don't remember what next week's video is. It doesn't matter. I'll be back next week, and I will actually be back this weekend with a vlog, hopefully. Fingers crossed. I am still doing my vlogs, but I am also not bullying myself if I don't find myself willing to do my hair and put on makeup, and instead I just want to get to work. So I'm going to find some balance in all of that somewhere, somehow. It's going to work out. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will, at the very minimum, be back next week, if not back this weekend.